Welcome to Non-Restraint Culture of Care training. It is EBI training. That stands for Emergency Behavior Intervention. The Children's Aid Society has a philosophy that good discipline is administered in a way that provides training or education and helps mold and influence a child's behavior and moral character who are in our care. Our discipline is more effective with positive relationships, and we should use our training and teaching skills to help mold children's behavior to respect the rights and property of other people, to know the difference between right and wrong, to have an internal or intrinsic value that helps us know when we need to do good things, and to recognize the worth of all people. The most desirable and effective means of teaching appropriate behavior is through positive reinforcement and positive relationships. All residents should be given the opportunity to demonstrate responsible behavior and appropriate decision making. Recognition and staff approval should follow appropriate decisions, while limits and plans for correcting behavior should follow inappropriate decisions. Appropriate behavior is expected from our residents, and to be honest, from our staff. Positive behavior merits age-appropriate privileges and rewards. Inappropriate behaviors may result in a removal of some privileges. It could have some logical consequences involved. So in this training, we're going to cover understanding anger, what that looks like, prevention and early intervention. We're going to cover healing is in our relationships. We are going to discuss the team approach to care, which is using the TIPS process. We're going to understand our EBI and reward policy of the agency, and how having a positive mindset versus a punishment mindset changes a youth's behavior for the better. One of the biggest questions we often see when people deal with children who are frustrated is, why are you so angry? That why has so much involved in it because of where our children come from. When you were hired, we went through trauma-informed care training, another form of behavior intervention training, and of course all the other required trainings. And we learned that the why that our children experience are vast and great, as these many colors in the crayons surrounding this picture here. Some of our kiddos suffer abuse. Some of our kiddos suffer physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, poverty, human trafficking, drug and alcohol exposure, domestic violence. Sometimes they even see their own parent harmed, and sometimes they've even seen their siblings or their parents die. And so why are they so angry? There's a lot of reasons why they're angry, and so we need to realize where they're coming from. So I love this quote: "The kids who need the most love will ask for it in the most unloving ways." And so we've learned that foster care kids and kids who've suffered abuse and neglect, not just foster care kids, but kids who suffered abuse and neglect, tend to have baggage, and they tend to put up barriers between themselves and other people. So they push other people away. And so it's easier to get angry. Like sometimes we can have kids who are here at the shelter for a great deal of time, and then they get angry before they leave. And they get angry before they leave because it's easier to hate us and leave us than to love us and leave us and miss us. And so sometimes the kiddos have those kind of issues. Also, the kiddos lack trust, and so they are easily angered because they've lost their sense of control, they lost their environment, they lost their family, they lost sometimes their school, their friends, their peers. They've lost everything. And so when you have lost everything and you are down to nothing, you tend to have a frustrated, sad, mad kind of underlying mood. And so we need to Allow the children to have those feelings, because those feelings are justified. And so, and we need to overlook sometimes their hostility, and we need to be sure and not take it personal. We talk about that in orientation, we talk about that in training, not taking it personal when the kids seem frustrated and they seem to hate the world. We need to understand where they're coming from, and that they didn't choose to be here. It was chosen for them, and they are in a grieving process, they're in a healing process, and so patience is one of the biggest things that we can offer our children at this time. Now let's talk about understanding anger. In the next section, you're going to identify the general physical signs of anger. We're going to identify the common triggers to anger. We're going to recognize the levels of anger, and we're going to learn appropriate interventions for each level of anger. We're going to have some tips to manage our own anger, and we're going to talk about some self-protection tips. Physiological or physical signs of anger. This is our awareness stage. What do we notice when people get angry? Their heart is beating faster. Their breathing rate increases. Sometimes their fists are clenched. Do you notice that in the picture of the little children? Their fists are clenched. Your face feels hot or cold. Notice in the lady in the top left corner, her cheeks are red. She's getting flushed. Her skin is changing colors. Sometimes their hands are shaking. Sometimes they have profuse sweating, or they start sweating a lot. They have a higher body temperature. They start to feel hot, and that's where your skin goes usually red, or you get that red flush. Suddenly, you get dry mouth. Sometimes you get so angry you stutter and you have trouble communicating. You have muscle tension. Sometimes you can get goosebumps. Sometimes your face can turn pale or red. Some kids and some adults have teeth grinding or jaw clenching. Notice in a lot of the pictures, including the adult and the children, that they have the clenched jaw. Those are just some of the early warning signs that someone is becoming angry. These are things that we need to watch for in the children, and we need to kind of take a mental note of what each child does, and sometimes even what each staff member does or adult does when they have those angry behaviors coming on, so we know how to do some intervention. We have to do early intervention by recognizing these particular body features, and it's important for us to talk to the children about them and ask them, you look pretty angry right now, your skin is turning flushed, do you feel frustrated, can we talk about that? Those kind of things. I'm seeing a kid when their hands are really tight and their hands are really clenched up, like the little boy who's got steam coming out of his ears, and all the little boys in that first row really have all their little hands little clenched. I often tell kiddos to take their hands and to squeeze them really, really tight, and then to open them up, and then to kind of wipe their hands on their pants if they have pants on or shorts, or kind of wipe them off on something, and then to squeeze them again, and then to wipe them again, just to kind of get some of that tension down, just to kind of get some of that tension released. If their heartbeat is beating faster and their breathing rate increases and they're almost panting, sometimes with the little kids I even have them take some slow deep breaths. Often I talk to them about doing kind of like dragon breathing, and we often think in terms of the little shows that they watch with dragons, and how you breathe in through your nose and blow out through your mouth like you're going to blow out a birthday candle. But also that's how dragons blow fire out of their bellies. And so oftentimes with little kids I explain that anger is kind of like a fire in their belly, and they can breathe in their nose and they can blow it out their mouth until they can kind of slow down and calm down to have a conversation. So be aware of these physical signs of anger. Now let's talk about setting a positive culture. Notice in this picture, behavior, let's talk, and then change. Correcting errors versus dishing out punishment. What do we mean there? Our goal is not just to dish out punishment to the kids. That's not our goal. We're not just here to say no, 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 no. Our goal is to try to correct children before they have to get that no. So that means we have to be hyper alert to what's going on with the kiddos, so we can help redirect them before they get to that situation that would cause them to get punishment. Consistency equals successful change. If we are consistent as a staff by following our emergency behavior intervention policies, by building a routine for the children, and by building a routine, I mean like following a structured schedule. Every time we get up at around the same time frame. We brush our teeth, we get ready for the day, we transition to breakfast, we go back, we get ready, clean up after breakfast or what have you, and then we start our activities. And so when we do our activities, we'll have activity time, we'll have free time, we'll have game time. Having a lot more structure actually helps keeps children's behavior in check. Also, like having quiet time, keeping the kids quiet during quiet time and letting them lay on their bed and relax and read a book or play quietly, but not having them just all sitting on the floor playing quietly. We need them to kind of get away from each other to give themselves some downtime. Making sure that we follow the routine outside, like we're all on the same page when playing in the playground. That's just another example. That the little tiny kids are on the tiny playground and that the bigger kids can use the bigger playground. And we're out there actively with them so we can hear what's going on and so we can intervene if they start getting into mischief. Making sure that we're all not riding our bikes at the exact same time so we don't crash into each other. Kind of having everybody do things in chunks or in groups. Building that routine just like that. Also using rewards and praise daily. We are supposed to give a token to each kid on each shift. So a kid would earn 3 tokens a day. 1 token per kid per shift if they function well. Now that doesn't mean that they hadn't gotten in trouble, okay? You can still get a token and have gotten in trouble. But did you strike a kid out? Your goal, again, is not to punish. Your goal is to give that token. Your goal is to say, Billy, I know you struggled today with getting along with others, but you really pulled it together, and I'm so proud of you. Here's your token for the day. That's where we yield change, rather than saying, Billy, when you yelled at so-and-so earlier today, you lost your token. Well, they only yelled at somebody one time. And so unless you really had to strike them out, I think you need to really work hard to give them their token. And don't assume that all of our children know how to do everything within our daily routine, just like cleaning a bedroom or something like that. They didn't grow up in the military, so it's not going to be military level clean. But we need to set that example ourselves and show them how to properly clean a room. And then congratulate them and thank them for doing a good job. And say, I know you could do that next time on your own, that kind of thing. That's building those relationships. If we use rewards and praise daily, follow a routine, follow our policies all the same as staff and as a team, then we build relationships with the kids and it improves our trust level with the children because they know that we are not going to deviate from our group plan. We're not going to be manipulated. And so it's harder for them to be sneaky and manipulate us if we're all together as a united team for change. Our goal is to have the children have healthy change together. This slide is just kind of a reminder of our use of trauma-informed practices to set our attitude when working with our kiddos. I love this quote. We need to make the positive so loud that the negative becomes almost impossible to hear. When kids come into our shelter, or when we start the day, or when we start a shift, or however that works, literally the tone is set as soon as the children hit the room. If the staff are negative, or if the staff are not getting along with one another, or if the staff are not excited about an activity, the kids can read that vibe. Or also if the staff are not working together as a team, the kids can read that vibe. And then we're not working cohesively as a team. It sets the tone to us having a harder shift. We need to understand why kids and staff get stuck in fight or flight mode. And they get stuck in that fight or flight mode because of all the baggage that follows us. Originally, when you did your orientation training, you learned about the ACEs studies, which shows that people have more dysfunction in their life, the higher their ACEs score goes up. So like if you were a child of an alcoholic home or domestic violence or abuse or poverty, or if you yourself experienced things that were traumatic, like the loss of a family member, whether it be to death or divorce or separation or things like that, just any kind of thing that would impact your life in the form of a traumatic event. That increases your ACEs studies and makes it harder for you to have interpersonal relationships with others and harder for you to get along. Of course, kiddos in the child abuse system, grief, social media, all the things that we're exposed to in life. There's so much negativity on social media. TV shows. I mean, there's so many negative TV shows nowadays. News media itself, like watching the public news, negative news in general, fast-paced lifestyle. Everybody wants everything now, and so everything needs to be like instant gratification. And so just that fast-paced lifestyle that it causes us all to be impatient. That's another thing that's impacting us. And of course, the technology age of that instant gratification, where you want it now kind of thing. A positive mindset really starts with us. Again, if we want to have that positive mindset, we have to come on shift, ready to think about how am I going to run my shift with my coworkers. I'm excited to work today. I'm excited to work with so-and-so together as a group. We've talked about it. We're going to plan these activities with the kiddos. We're going to run a field day today. We've asked administrators for prizes and for components to our field day, and we're really going to have some energy burn today, and the kids are going to learn how to be a better team. So literally, whether you're planning a movie night or whether you're planning a craft day or a bingo day or an outing or a talent show or an art contest or an outing somewhere, whatever you're planning to do, working together with your coworkers to make it so positive. And like the picture says, we needed to make the positive so loud that the negative becomes almost impossible to hear, that you hype it up like you're a hype man or a hype woman, and you hype it up so much like, this is going to be great, guys, this is going to be fun, let's do this, all right, we're all in it together kind of thing. The more you can hype things up, the better it is for our kiddos to let go of some of those negative things that are over there on the left that have the little arrows pointing at them. One thing for sure is we don't want to talk about politics in front of the kiddos, because politics is very negative. We don't want to have those kind of arguments amongst ourselves in front of the children. If there's bad things that have happened in the world today, like what if there was a school shooting? Well, we're not going to necessarily bring that up for just common conversation with the kiddos unless the kids bring it up. And so we're going to try to avoid those things. We want to try to stay away from the negative and emphasize the positive when working with our kiddos. And so this slide is really just a refresher to let us know that our trauma-informed care practices are always setting the tone for our attitude. We need to be alert on things that are out in the world today and that can bring us down. And especially when children are talking about negative things, we want to redirect them in a positive way and say, rather than just saying, hey, quit talking about that, we need to say, hey, just kind of distract them by saying, hey, can you tell me about, everybody in the room, let's talk about one positive that happened in your day today and one thing that you're looking forward to tomorrow. That's an easy way to distract and to redirect a negative conversation. Now let's talk about understanding what prompts an anger outburst. Kids often have an anger outburst when they lose power, status, or respect, or if they feel like they've been insulted or embarrassed. Sometimes redirecting a kid in front of others, depending on what they're getting in trouble for, can be embarrassing. They can feel as though you disrespected them by getting onto them in a public context. So sometimes we do need to get onto them directly to stop their behavior, but sometimes some of the things they're doing can merit where we get onto them or talk to them about their behavior outside of the main group. Just pull them off to the side and let them know they need to change some things. Also, not having things turn out the way they expected. Oftentimes the kiddos are going to be mad and have anger outbursts, specifically when we planned an outing and then we can't go because something happened, or if a parent didn't show up for visitation, or if a CASA didn't show up. Oftentimes the kiddos get disappointed when they believe things are going to happen a certain way. Sometimes they can have an anger outburst when they think they're going to go home and they're told they're not, or they think that that court means that they're going to leave that day, and that doesn't mean they're going to leave that day. That just means they're talking about their case. And so oftentimes kiddos will put false hopes into what is going to be expected, and when that doesn't pan out, they get angry and they have outbursts. Sometimes there's a fairness in a rule or treatment of the children. It's important for us to treat all the children equally in the same age range. Of course, different ages are treated differently because of their abilities and skills to do things. But just because one kid is nicer and one kid is being more annoying doesn't mean that they should have difference in rules and or treatment at the shelter. Again, with the token system, even if you like a kid who's doing really, really well, that doesn't mean they can get 2 tokens instead of 1. Each kid just gets 1 token per shift, so they can earn 3 tokens a day to use in the token store. All the kids get the same amount of video game time. All the kids get the same amount of treasures and treats that we have at the shelter. No one should get more than the other person. And by doing that, we eliminate some of that fairness conflict that the kids have. Jealousy is a big thing, and the one that goes right underneath it, that not sharing or not obtaining what you want. Sometimes we have agency toys so the kids can share those things, but sometimes they have personal things and they don't want to share that. And the other kid gets jealous, and so sometimes they might steal that or have an anger outburst or throw it or try to break it or things like that. So we have to be real conscious of what's going on with our kiddos who've been here a long time and what kind of kiddos who've been here a short time. Sometimes kiddos who've been here a long time, they might have earned a lot of toys along the way, but they also start coveting and taking toys that belong to the shelter. That happens a lot. And so then that kid winds up with a whole store in their room. And then the kids who just got here and haven't been here very long have nothing. And so we need to make sure that we're really alert to that and make sure that our new children actually have some things in their room that are enjoyable for them as well. And they can start earning those things and gathering those things just like the other kids did, so they can have things to keep their time occupied, especially during quiet time or when they have downtime in their room. Sometimes we get anger outbursts when we have communication breakdowns or misunderstandings. Perception is 90% of what we interpret. So out of the 100% of communication, 10% is actually the words that went out of our mouth, and 90% of it is what we interpret as what was said. Oftentimes we put feelings or emotions on other people's communications. And so that reflective listening, we're going to learn that later on in this lesson, is going to be very beneficial, because sometimes having that reflective listening helps us prevent those communication breakdowns or misunderstandings by just repeating what we thought we heard. Sometimes we have anger outbursts because we are experiencing physical pain. I mean, like, what if we don't feel good? What if we didn't sleep good? What if it's a physiological thing to where I didn't get enough sleep, I don't feel well, I have a headache, I don't feel good, my tooth hurts, whatever. That I'm currently experiencing physical pain, so I could have an anger outburst because of that. Sometimes it's experiencing emotional pain. Sometimes I had gone to visitation and my parent didn't show up, or my parent told me they didn't love me and didn't want me. Sometimes I've been kicked out of the home and I'm one of those older teenagers and I've been told I'm unwanted. That's very painful, to be told you're unwanted. And so, and that's the same thing here when kiddos are playing together and they're in a group together. When they don't allow the other person to be part of a group and they try to tell them they don't belong or they can't be friends and things like that, that's experiencing emotional pain. And so being ignored is another kind of thing where you experience emotional pain. That's why staff should always greet all the children the same, with a smile, with kindness, and be sure and acknowledge each child in the room, not just the ones that they get along with the best. That's often why we change groups with the kiddos and you don't have the same group every day, is because we want you to experience different groups, and we want the children to experience different group leaders, so there's not necessarily a one-on-one attachment bond built with those kiddos, and that way all the kids can feel valued equally. Occasionally, kiddos will feel anger outbursts if they feel like they're being threatened with physical or emotional pain, and they also can have anger outbursts if they feel like they're being threatened with the loss of privileges or punishment. Sometimes people will say, I'm going to give you early bedtime. I'm going to take your token. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. When you layer levels of punishment, all you're doing is setting yourself up for failure because that child now has nothing to lose. You've already taken everything, so I might as well just go ahead and make the day miserable. I might as well just keep it going and just be obnoxious because I've already lost everything anyway. It doesn't matter. So again, that goes back to our positive mindset and our rewards-based system. We want kids to earn, we want kids to learn, we want kids to change, we want kids to grow. And the only way to do that is when we build that relationship with them and we don't just sit and threaten them with a loss of privileges or fun things. We want them to understand when we see a behavior that's wrong, we want to educate them and redirect them in a healthy way and say, hey, could you not do that? And this is the reason why, rather than just getting onto them and giving them a punishment. Also, having an important or fun activity interrupted, postponed, or stopped. So many of our kids are neurodivergent. So many of our kids have other issues, whether it be autism or ADHD or OCD or just PTSD or trauma in general. They don't like to stop an activity. And kids from poverty who came from nothing and all of a sudden wound up landing in a shelter that's kind of like Toys R Us, we have all these toys and wonderful things to play with and do. It is hard for them to transition into stopping an activity and going to do another thing. So it's very important to educate our young people and to let them know when we're going to transition an activity. Hey guys, in 5 minutes we're going to clean up our toys and put them all away and we're going to do something different, okay? So I'm going to give everybody a warning, and then in a few minutes I'm going to let you have another warning before we get ready to end the activity, clean up together as a group, and then move on to the next activity. It's important to give those kids transitional cues to let them know what's going on. If we have to postpone an event or stop an event and we can't reschedule or we can't continue, it's important to let the kids know why that happened and when we would try to reschedule it. You may not have the ability to make that decision, so don't lie to them. It's important to say, we're going to have to look at our schedule and we're going to have a supervisory staff, whoever, get back with us on that changed time and date. Now let's talk about increased awareness of anger triggers. Some of our children came from physically abusive homes or homes that had domestic violence in them, where there was a lot of screaming, yelling, hitting, object throwing, property damage, a lot of yelling, a lot of cussing. And so we have to understand they're expecting pain. Just like in our image here, where the adult is screaming kind of at the kid and pointing a finger, and you see the kid kind of covering their face and kind of bearing down like they're going to get hit. We need to be aware that just our hand movements, like these kind of kiddos who've experienced that level of abuse, it's like post-traumatic stress disorder, or that trauma-informed care that we learned about earlier and during orientation. The kiddos will flinch, and you'll see them flinch, or you'll see that the loud noises bother them. And so we need to be sure and bring it down a notch and talk in a more peaceful tone to those kiddos, because they are scared. They're genuinely scared, and that could trigger them to become into a fight mode or a flight mode because they are afraid and they're getting angry. Feeling that you have been treated unfairly and unjust. Now, we talked about that earlier on the previous slide. Literally, our kiddos here want to have the same privileges as the other children that are in their same age range. Now, we can have like privileges for the teens, privilege for the schoolers, and privilege for the toddlers. We can have those different kind of outings or things that we're going to do as a separate entity because it's age appropriate. But in those circumstances, we have to explain that to the kids. Sometimes we'll go on an outing and the older kids can see one movie where the little kids can't see that movie and they have to go see a different one. But some of the little kids' argument is going to be, but I got to see that at home, Well, unfortunately, we do have to apologize and say, I'm sorry you got to see that at home, but the law doesn't allow for us to let you see that here because we have to follow the same rules as the movie guidelines, and you're too young to go to that movie, like the PG-13 rule, things like that. Also believing that things should be different. A lot of the times the kids may be in denial, and they may want to not recognize the fact that mom and dad had a drug problem or that there was domestic violence in the home. We've even had situations, and it's really hurtful to have these situations, where we have young people who one of the children in the home is molested and the other children are not molested, and then some of the children get mad at that child who disclosed the molestation. And so, because they believe that the stepdad or the dad or whoever is a good person, they didn't do anything like that to them, and so they don't want to believe that that's true. And so we have to protect everyone, and we have to make sure that those children are not bullying the victim child, but we also need to allow them to understand their frustrations, and that's something that they're going to have to work on in counseling. That's something we're going to have to work on with their to engage worker and things like that, to have them understand what's going on with their case. We can't control their parents' drug screens. We can't control whether their parents show up for visitation. But we can talk to the children honestly and be like, you know, I'm sorry that your parent didn't show up for his visitation. I understand that you're sad. That would make me sad too. Just having that empathy and the kids understanding that you understand where they're coming from. You don't have to keep going with the conversation, and you don't have to hash out the mom's or the dad's right and wrong behavior. The main thing is just to understand that the situation was sad, and you know, hopefully they show up next time. And right now, let's try to focus on the positive, which is the only thing we can control right now. Sometimes anger triggers are rigid thinking, where I am right, you are wrong. Sometimes the kids feel that they are right and we are wrong. Sometimes we feel that we are right and they are wrong, and sometimes the truth is in the middle. And so we need to be honest with ourselves and see if we're just drawing the line in the sand just because we can, or if we're actually being fair to the kid and giving them choice. When I give the choice on activities for the kids to do, I usually try to think about 1 to 3 choices. Anything over 3 is too many choices with kids. You need 1 to 3 choices, and we need to pick the one and move on. Now, if you have a group of 5 and you give them 1 to 3 choices, and 4 of the children choose A, and the last child chooses C as their choice, then you're going to have to accommodate with the 4 and explain maybe that you could do activity A first and then you could do activity C, because that's what this one kid wanted to do out of the group. However, we're going to do the majority activity first, and if we have enough time, then we're going to move on to the next activity, and if not, we'll get back to that next activity next time. That way everybody can feel valued. Judging that a situation is illegitimate or wrong or unfair. Sometimes we can go into a situation where we don't have all the information, and so we see everything as wrong or a lie or false, like kids fighting and things like that. So we go into it with our own preconceived views of the situation without getting enough information. So the best thing to do is, I always look at it as, when there's a fight with 2 kids, it's like having a quarter. There's a side with the president on one side, and there's a side with the eagle on the other side. So literally, the truth lies in the middle. The truth lies in the middle, where those ridges are on that quarter. And so everybody has an opportunity to say what they want, need, or feel, but we're going to have to do some compromise and go into the middle when there's kids fighting. Another problem that we have with anger triggers is ruminating about events that set off the anger in the first place, past, or just harping on things. We can't be a sin taker on our kiddos. So that means, like, literally remind them that you always do this, or this always happens with you. Don't do black and white concrete thinking with our kiddos. You need to allow them the opportunity to change, and every day is a new day. Don't beat them down about the past. We only need to live in the present. And we need to look at how we're going to change each day, each shift, day by day. Keep it simple, one day at a time. If any of you have heard of the Alcoholics Anonymous program, that's one of their key facets. That's why it's the most successful drug and alcohol program in the world, is because 2 of their mottos are keep it simple, take it one day at a time. And that's what we're going to do with our kiddos. Keep it simple, take it one day at a time, one issue at a time. So if you have multiple levels of issues, let's say arguing and fighting, throwing items, and then stealing, and name calling, let's do 4 items. then all 4 of those things are different. So you're going to address each specific item separately, and they're not involved with the other item, okay? Because we want to change each item that's causing the child grief. And so we need to isolate each problem separately and identify them separately. Facts about anger. Anger actually follows a predictable pattern, and it has levels. The levels have observable characteristics in each level. There are opportunities for intervention at each level that are present that we can identify so we could make changes. Other than a situation at hand, lack of sleep, peer problems, a fight with a significant other, and illness, these are some additional things that can actually take place that we have no control over. Okay. The levels go in this order, and if you notice the graph, number 1 starts at the bottom, and that red line that goes across the board, that's almost our homeostasis, or our normal level of functioning. So let's say the light pink line or light red line, where you have questions and an in controller on the same level, that's where we want to be most of the time. So when a kid is getting frustrated, they're going to start asking questions. And they may not ask you a question. They may ask somebody else a question like, hey, have you seen my toy motorcycle? Hey, where is my motorcycle? And you're going to see them ask more and more questions about the missing item. They're going to ask other children. They're going to talk loud about it. They're looking for it. That's just one example, is you're going to hear questions on different things. Then you're going to get back talk. Sometimes they may argue with you. You're going to have refusal, like I'm not going to do that. Sometimes they're going to challenge you, like, well, if you do this, I'm going to do that. Finally, you're going to get that outburst where that's the peak of the graph, where the kid's yelling, screaming, throwing things, sometimes hitting, having a fit. And then notice how once you have that outburst level, then you plummet like a roller coaster. It goes all the way down to number 6 with a quiet period. And that's because they're emotionally exhausted from their fit. And then they go back to in control. Once they're done resting and their quiet period is over, that you can see with their behaviors, their quiet period is over and they get back to in control, that's when you can actually have a conversation with them about what all happened and how to avoid that in the future. So that's really, I like this graph because it shows you how things rev up like a volcano. If we can intervene at questions, if we can intervene at back talk, if we can intervene at refusal, then we will not make it to challenge. We will not make it to outburst. We will immediately just go back to in control. Usually the quiet period only occurs usually after an outburst has taken place. Questions from a kid. They may be legitimate questions about an activity, missed information, etc. Here's some examples. What are we supposed to be doing now? Why do I have to go? That's usually like to an appointment. Why does this stuff help me? And that's sometimes like medicine. Maybe it's an attempt to ask a question, to question your authority a little bit. Why do I have to listen to you? Who died and made you boss? Sometimes they'll want to override a general staff member and go directly to an administrative or supervisory level staff. Know that when they do that and they ask to speak to one of us, take them to one of us, make that appointment time. If we're not here in the office and it's not crucial, we can make that appointment to meet the next day. But if it is crucial and they're really struggling with issues, then definitely give one of us a call. You don't want to call us all the time because then that takes away your power. But if they do use one of our names as a point of contact to question your authority and to question what you're about to do as far as like activities or why this rule is this way, that kind of thing, if you can't pull out the rules and show it to the kid from their book, then you can actually call one of us and have one of us in the administrative team help you through this with the kiddo. And that way it allows the kiddo the opportunity to hear from us. And it gives us the opportunity to support you as a staff member to reaffirm your authority figure as a caregiver of the kids. Here's some appropriate interventions for kids who are questioning. It's those words written in purple at the bottom. The easiest way to prevent escalation from this point is to simply answer the question. And if you don't know the answer, don't lie. Like, when am I going home? I don't know that answer, honey. If you've heard me answer that question, I don't know that answer, honey. I just know that there is an initial court hearing, and then after that, sometimes there's another court hearing. The only person who would really know that is your to engage worker, and they may not know that. It could be known from a judge. Oftentimes, when they ask you questions along those lines, those are case manager questions. You can have the kid write those questions down. Sometimes just getting their thoughts out of their head is beneficial. Have them write those questions down and then turn it into the case managers, Miss Julie and Miss Kelly, and then they will get some of those questions answered and get back with the kiddo. They'll make an appointment with the kiddo to get back with them to cover those answers that they're looking for. Sometimes it's assuming that the questions are real. Do not assume that the person is trying to start something or be manipulative just by asking a question. Sometimes they're not just challenging. They just want to know if something's actually real or valid. And so, like, sometimes it's maybe like quiet time. Well, in quiet time, do we have to take a nap? Depending on your age, sometimes kids need a nap, sometimes they don't need a nap, but we do have to go to quiet time, and we are going to rest during quiet time. You can lay on your bed and read a book. You can sit in your bed and play a toy quietly, but we're not going to talk to our neighbors, and we're going to have quiet time. This is our time just to kind of decompress and adjust from all the overstimulus that we get during the daytime. That's a good way to kind of talk about that. Night shift, like one of the things that they might get is, well, I've got a doctor's appointment, so I don't need to go to school. But that on the bulletin board in there, it said the kid does go to school, and then we're going to come get him when school's out. So you actually have the answer to that question, because on the bulletin board it said send the kid to school, and that the kid needs to go to school, and then we'll come get him out of school. And so, like, sometimes you know the information, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to call and ask a case manager and or an administrator some of the information if you don't have them. It's really, really important to use reflective listening to maintain clear communication. And we're going to cover more of what reflective listening is later in this lesson. Now let's cover reflective listening. This key slide is one thing that can really help you prevent communication breakdowns with staff and with the kids. It also prevents a lot of anger, misinterpretation over respect issues, and fairness issues. We have to, number one, look at the picture right there. One person is talking and one person is listening. Notice only one person's mouth is open and one person's mouth is shut. Let the person do the talking. So, and when you're doing reflective listening, it may be important for you as you learn this skill or develop the skill better to say, you know, Billy, I want to do some reflective listening with you. I know that you're really frustrated right now, so I'm going to let you do the talking. Why don't you tell me what's going on? I'm going to have a notepad here so I can make some notes because I want to ask you some questions at the end. Is that okay? Then Billy is going to start talking. You're going to focus on what they're saying. You're going to write down key things that you hear. Focus on any person's emotions. Look at their body language. Look at the tone of voice, their sound, and the words that they're stating. Write down key things that they may want to address to show you understand what they said. And so that's when you start to restate what you heard. And so you would say, Billy, based on what you said, I heard this, okay? That's not saying, you know, you mean this. That's where people get it wrong. You meant this. I know your meaning. I know what you were talking about because I know how you felt about it. Unless Billy said and identified the feeling, you don't know that. You don't know what they felt unless they declare a feeling. Keep your answers short and clear. Try not to be in a lecture format. And smile. Stay positive and supportive. Sometimes a kid may use some profanity or some judging language when they're communicating, and that's okay. This is not the time to pick a fight and to argue with them about all their language. After they're done talking and you are done writing, at the end of your conversation, when you reflect back and they agree on what you heard, you don't have to repeat the cuss words, but when you agree or you reflect back to what they said and you repeat it back to them to make sure you understood what they are mad about, then you can say, hey, I just appreciate you working through this reflective listening process with me. Let's get a handle on this. Let's go do some reflecting listening as a group with the person that you're struggling with. So sometimes you may be having 2 staff members visit with 2 children. It may be 1 staff member visiting with 2 children, giving each child the opportunity to talk without the other one speaking, so they can be completely heard while you're taking notes, and then both of them need to get in an agreement with what that you thought you heard them say, and they all heard the different versions of what was said, and then everybody can come to 100% agreement to what our goal to change our actions are at the end. And then you would acknowledge if we need to use different language, like not labeling, by using labeling terms like you're lazy, crazy, stupid, ugly, like name calling. We don't use those words. We don't use words like hate. We don't use harmful words or words that include violence. And we also don't yell, and we also are not going to just cuss. And so we need to, at the end, stay positive, smile, thank each child for participating, get to some kind of middle ground, and document it. And it can be documented on paper. It can be documented on paper, photocopied, and attached to each kid's notes, so we know that you worked out a conflict between two children. Sometimes it's just arguing over sharing something. Sometimes a kid will say, well, I said that person could borrow that. Well, in our behavior rules, it talks about not sharing and not borrowing. And that's because we have so many problems with it. And so then you would go over that situation of how we don't borrow or lend our items. And also you'd have to give the item back. And then sometimes you find out that a kid actually stole something. So there's a lot more to the story. That's why when we do reflective listening, that person gets a chance to talk. We don't talk, we just listen. And then when they're done talking, we tell them what we heard they said. Then they can say yes or no and change what we heard. We write it down and make corrections. We repeat it one more time to make sure that we got the corrections clear. And then that is our solution. That's what we're going to work off of to help resolve their conflict or problem. Back talk from kids. Now, before I read the slides, I want you to look at the little boy with all the question marks around his head. As adults, sometimes we think kids are back talking when they're over questioning. Neurodivergent children, sometimes children who have IDD, autism, ADHD, OCD, alphabet soup, PTSD, all the different kind of features. Sometimes those kids over question things and they make overstatements. That doesn't mean that is technically back talk. They're just running their mouth. Let's all learn that word together. Run in their mouth. Sometimes when a kid's just running their mouth, it's better for us to ignore them, okay? And then praise them when they're not running their mouth, rather than picking a fight with that issue. We want to make sure to recognize what is really back talk and what is really just running their mouth. So if a person is showing their anger and trying to incite you to anger, they're going to be saying things like, you're always telling me what to do, okay? They're mad. That's an actual real statement. You're always telling me what to do. And so a good, understanding of that is, I'm sorry I have to tell you what to do because we have a routine to follow and we have many things that are going on that have to happen in a certain time frame. So yes, unfortunately, I do have to tell you what to do. And I know that's not fun. And I know you want more control in your life. And we're going to work on that. We'll figure out ways that we can implement some more control in your life. And we'll definitely talk to your case manager about some things that are frustrating you. And we can make a list of those things. But I'm sorry, we're going to have to go on and do this right now. Now notice how I kind of described what was going on. I didn't just sit and argue with them about, I'm the adult and you're the kid and blah blah this and blah blah that. I gave them the opportunity to understand that I recognize that I am telling them what to do all the time. I have to. It's part of my job description. I love this one. Kids say it all the time. Why don't you do it? And that is a particular one where staff sometimes I do see violate that. And that's like if kids are lounging on the couch and they have their feet like they're not supposed to. Why don't you do it? And that's true. The staff should behave the same way the children have to behave. The rules the children have to follow, we also have to follow. And so the kids are right in that particular instance. They have a justified issue of anger if we're not doing what's expected of us, just like what's expected of them. Sometimes also when we're trying to get a kid to do an activity, that's another one where why don't you do it kind of thing. If we're telling a kid that we're going to do a craft or play a sport or sing a song or do whatever, if we're not positive and fully engaged and we're just observers kind of sitting off in the background, just kind of staring out into space, then they have no buy-in. There's no relationship building there. You're just taking up space in the room watching them. And that's why they're frustrated and they don't want to participate in the activity, because the activity is not fun because you're not fully engaged. These children got ignored in their home of their parents. Their parents were on the phone or on dope or busy doing other things, and we're ignoring the kids. And so the biggest thing that we can do to benefit these kiddos is give them our full attention. And so you would get less talk back from the kiddos if you are giving them that full attention. Sometimes the kids will say, you don't have any idea what you're talking about. And that means sometimes, usually that's kind of a statement that they'd make about their lifestyle. Like, you don't know where they come from, or you don't know how that is. And we've had some things where kids really don't know what's going on and they really need to be educated. But it's not a time to challenge them on their background information from their personal lives. And so on those particular instances, it's good to get information from the case manager and allow the case manager and counselors and the 2 engaged workers to come up and then help them fix that. Now, sometimes it pertains to like going home, or a parent not being able to visit, or them not being allowed to talk to somebody on the phone, or things like that. So those are a lot of things that you have no control over. I have no control over. We have to get those details from somebody else. And then sometimes it's about rules. Like, they may challenge you that you don't know what you're talking about on the rules, and they may say that, well, Miss Lisa said, or Miss Sheila said, or Miss Rhonda said, or Miss Nicole said that we could do X, Y, Z, and you don't know what you're talking about. Well, that's the easiest thing you can do, is pick up your phone and say, well, let's go over here to the company phone and let me call them, and we're going to ask them what they think about this situation. Then it takes away that statement, and you're not challenging them. So be sure when you make that statement that you're going to call one of us, you're not doing it in a tone that's challenging the kiddo. So, I could be wrong. Let's call and ask. See how I did that? I could be wrong. Let's call and ask. Not, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to call Miss Sheila. You're wrong. I'm right. There's that whole argument factor. Don't get into an argument with a kiddo just for argument's sake. And sometimes the kids are just going to say, this is just all stupid. And it is stupid. Yes, there's a lot of stupid things in the world, but sometimes we need to do stupid things because it's part of the process of life. And so sometimes they'll say that the movie is stupid, or sometimes they'll say a rule is stupid, or sometimes they'll say an activity is stupid. A lot of the times kiddos will actually say an activity is stupid if they don't have the skill. For instance, if they fear arts and crafts, they're going to say it's stupid. If they fear a sport, they're going to say it's stupid. If they fear Scrabble because they can't spell, they're going to say it's stupid. Roller skating, if they can't roller skate, if they can't swim, they're going to say it's stupid. And so often letting a kid know that you have felt stupid before too, and say, you know what, Billy, I sometimes feel like I'm lost, or lack of a better word, I sometimes feel like I'm stupid when I do these activities because I'm afraid to paint. I'm afraid that mine's not going to be as pretty as somebody else's, or I'm afraid to play basketball because I don't know how to make a layup and I'm not good at shooting hoops. And letting them know that sometimes we as adults even feel stupid, that sometimes takes away their no of why they don't want to participate in an activity, and it turns it back into a yes, and then all of a sudden they got to experience something they've never experienced, and it becomes fun. And guess what? You're building that healthy relationship where they see you as a human being who feels intimidated like them, who feels overwhelmed like them, but you overcame it, and now you're that role model for them to follow, to where they're like, gosh, Miss Sarah, she's overcome hardships just like me. I'm going to be like Miss Sarah. And so that's really what we're looking for. So our appropriate interventions for back talk is staying calm and in control of ourselves. Being aware of your facial expressions, your posture, your voice, and your sounds. Don't roll your eyes. Don't have a sarcastic tone. Let that whatever tone, Don't put your hand on your hip. Don't pop your head. Don't roll your eyes. Don't shrug your shoulders. Try to keep a neutral stance. Don't be challenging to the kiddos because it just sets them up for back talk. Distance is also very important. Keeping a good 3 feet distance between you and that person is really good. Also, speak slowly and civil. Don't yell, don't cross and fold your arms, and don't look closed off at the kiddo. Try to be open and communicative. Redirect that person back to the topic of the discussion. So like if they get off track and say, this is just all stupid, I hate this, that, and the other, blah, 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 get back to what we were trying to get them to do in the first place and say, I realize that this is stupid. I too have felt lost and stupid over activities myself. But let's try this and get back to the activity that we were originally talking about. It is challenging, but if you can master this task of not taking back talk personal, you will achieve so much peace on your shift. You will be surprised, and you'll build great relationships with the kids. Refusal from kids. The person is challenging your control of the situation by refusing to comply with the direction. I'm not going. I'm not going to do that. Crossing their arms, turning their head, ignoring you. Do it yourself. I love the little clip art with a kid with his hands up saying no. How to respond positively when your kid refuses. What do? Our appropriate interventions for refusal is number 1, stay calm, cool, and collected. Your behavior, your reaction can actually impact the situation. Like, oh, yes, you are. You know, there's no point in having that tone and challenging them. If you are responding to the person's anger, the person will only become more angry. Give the person 2 clear choices that are reasonable and appropriate and explain the consequences of each choice. And so like if it's bath time and they don't want to take a bath, often that is a situation. I've learned that at bath time, sometimes it's just the order of which is the baths occur. They didn't want to take their bath first, or they didn't want to take their bath last. They didn't want to take a shower and they wanted to take a tub bath, or they didn't want to take a tub bath and they wanted to take a shower bath. Sometimes it involves that they didn't have any control over the bath time situation. I like them come pick out their soaps, put them in little cups, let them pick out a wash rag, pick out a towel, and, you know, have some kind of fun activity kind of out there while the other kids are bathing. I usually do some kind of fun activity that we can do while we're all either if you're sitting on their bed and they're not bothering somebody waiting their turn, that's fine. But if they're wanting to kind of be together, then they're right there with me to where we can kind of do a game or an activity together. And so then sometimes those kiddos who are refusing to take a bath, if you let them pick the game and say, I'm going to let you pick the game, but you have to take the bath first. Immediately, sometimes you can get those no's to a yes just by renegotiating. And all I did was try to figure out a way to get to a yes without having this battle. So sometimes it's dealing with eating, trying new foods and things like that. How can you make that more fun without making it a battle? Looking at every situation, taking medication, changing clothes and wearing clean clothes, cleaning a room, putting toys away, transitioning activities, ending an activity to move on to another activity. All these different things. There's a way to get to a yes without fighting. If you can stay calm, cool, and collected and use your brain to think about the 2 choices, and like I said before, even 1 to 3 choices of the alternatives to get that kid to a yes. Sometimes it's just asking a question yourself. Well, then why don't you want to do that? What do we need to do to get you to do that? Sometimes just asking them that, they can tell you, I'm tired of always having to go first. Or I'm tired of always having to go last. There's not enough hot water. Or the kid before me doesn't clean out the bathtub and there's hair in the bathtub. There's all kinds of silly little reasons of why they want to do something differently. Oftentimes, like at mealtime and snack time, if you could get that kiddo who's always saying no, that they don't want to do something, to be a leader in an activity or to be a leader in handing out some kind of snack or putting things out, oftentimes you can get them to a yes without even having to have the conversation. Challenges from kids. The person is attempting to directly challenge your authority. Literally, these kids are refusing to cooperate. Like in the sentences here, you can't make me do it. I don't have to do that. Pick on somebody else. And it is true. You can't make them do stuff. You really can't. Sometimes we're just at a loss. We have to just document that they refuse to eat, document that they refuse their medication, document that they refuse to go to school. When they refuse to go to school, we can actually call truancy authorities and actually get help in those instances. Same thing with medication, same thing with eating. If they refuse for a certain period of time, we can actually get medical and clinical intervention, but it's not from our agency. It's outside of our agency. When they say pick on somebody else, sometimes we don't realize that we're asking one kid to do too much. And so sometimes you'll have a kid who's really positive and a really good leader and really good with their younger siblings and everything like that. Then all of a sudden they're like, you can't make me do it, pick on somebody else. And then what you've done is, and you've done it not to be mean, but you've done it by nature, is they've always kind of helped take care of their siblings. So you're asking them to help do something they're normally accustomed to, and all of a sudden they don't want to do it anymore. And so we're asking them to help pick up when we're not asking the other children to pick up the toys. And so we need to make sure that we include everybody in behavior changes and not just one person. Appropriate interventions for challenging situations are, number one, try to remove either the person or the audience. Now, that's not with your hands. There is no physical removal of them with your hands. So you could say, hey, everybody, could y'all go to the dining room since we're in the living room so Sarah and I can have a conversation, because she's struggling right now and I think she needs some personal space. See how I said that? I didn't say Sarah's being bad. I said Sarah needed some personal space. She's working on something, and could you all give us some space? I need you to go away. And that's where other staff should be paying attention and realize that something's going on. Another staff member might even initiate that by saying, hey, Sheila, I noticed that Sarah is needing some time over here away from the group so she can talk to you maybe. So I'm going to take this group and go into the dining room area while Sarah has a chance to calm down. And so that's just two different ways we could have handled that one situation. The person may escalate faster because the other people are watching. It gives them an audience, especially if they laugh or they interact with the situation. You never want to get far enough away from staff, and the other staff doesn't need to get far away from you in case you need to seek help in case it escalates further. Like if the child were to try to punch a window or hurt herself in some way or start throwing objects. Check your own behavior and make sure that you are in control when talking to the kiddos. When they're challenging you by saying, pick on somebody else, I don't have to do that, you can't make me do that, or get out of my face and things like that, literally keep yourself in check first. That goes back to the previous slide saying keep calm, keep your tone in check, and make sure that you have a clear head when you're having a conversation with the kiddos. Always increase your distance between yourself and the person. Don't fold your arms. Don't wave your arms around when you're talking. And always restate those 1 to 3 choices with the kiddos and allow them, through reflective listening, to tell you what's going on, what the real problem is. Building that relationship with the kiddos, you're actually asking them, hey, Sarah, you're normally not like this, man. What's going on? Can you tell me what's going on? It really makes me sad to see you this frustrated, and I don't want to hurt your feelings. I don't want this situation to be like it is, and so help me help you. Help me figure out what's going on here and what we can do to resolve this. Opening your mouth, getting that communication going with Sarah to try to build that relationship, and then once she gets it under control, say, thank you so much, Sarah. That really, man, I just see you growing. Every day I see you growing as a person, and you're just becoming more and more mature, and I just thank you so much for handling this problem on your own and gaining self-control on your own. That's just amazing. You know, throwing in those praise opportunities, giving those opportunities to praise her and compliment her for her changes in behavior is very key to making her have continued change. Outbursts from kids. Man, look at the little guy screaming and throwing a fit there on the left. He is hot. He is mad. Guys, this is where we failed. We waited too long. We didn't intervene fast enough. So now we have to get the situation under control. When a kid has an outburst, they're no longer able to maintain control. They're either verbal or physically aggressive. With a verbal outburst, they scream, yell, sometimes they cuss, sometimes they cry. With a physical outburst, sometimes they might attack another kid or try to attack you. They kick, they throw, they break things, they run away, slam doors, they do all kinds of things, you know, throw themselves down and throw a fit. They do things along those levels. Appropriate interventions for outbursts. If the outburst is just verbal, give the kid some space. Allow the kid to vent without a lecture. Now that means they may be cussing for a while. You know, I hate you, I hate this, I hate that, cussing and whatever. the best thing to do is to get the group to go away from them. Again, just like on the previous slide, you're going to say, hey, Billy needs a moment here. Could y'all go into the dining room so Billy and I can be in here and have a chance to cool down and talk this out? Do not attempt to communicate with Billy until Billy calms down. When Billy is in a full rage, you just need to say it one time. You don't have to say it 400 times. You don't have to lecture. Just say in a calm voice, hey, Billy, when you calm down, man, I want to talk to you about this. I know you're frustrated. I'm going to just sit here quietly and wait for you to calm down. And then when you're ready to talk, I'm here for you, and I want to talk this through because I know you're frustrated and I get it. Wait for the episode to progress naturally to the next level, which is the quiet period, before you try to talk to Billy. If Billy's still in a full rage mode, there's no point in talking to Billy because Billy doesn't want to listen to you in the first place, and you're just going to set him off. So don't try to argue with him, and don't try to tell him not to scream. Don't tell him try not to yell. Don't try to tell him not to cuss. Just try to allow him to wind down. Remember to get the audience away, but not physically. Now, if the outburst is physical, sometimes we have to remove the bystanders quicker. Ask them to relocate quickly. That means if Billy's throwing objects and things like that. Sometimes you need to exit the room yourself, but you have to still maintain visual eye contact with the youth. So sometimes Billy just needs you and everyone to get into the dining room while he's kind of pacing around in the living room and kind of throwing a fit. And so sometimes that is the case. When Billy becomes calm, that is not the time that you're going to say, hey, let's start cleaning up. You want to have the conversation to where everybody's at peace, everybody's to understanding, everybody's had feedback, everybody's processed the information of how we could have done things differently. And then it's not Billy's responsibility to totally clean up by himself because Billy lost his self-control and needs help cleaning up at this point. And so you're not cleaning up for Billy. And Billy's not cleaning up for himself. You're cleaning up together as a team because, again, it falls back to we're building a relationship. What happens when things get too aggressive? We need to call an administrator or supervisor to initiate a crisis response team, CRT, meeting and implement a nonviolent physical crisis intervention for a fighting and violence on a youth. And so what we would do is if kids are fighting, we're going to have a meeting with the two children and talk about how we are not going to do that in the future. We're going to make a safety plan and things along those lines. That would usually involve an administrator, a case manager, sometimes to engage worker, parent, and or probation officer, CPS worker, people along those lines in our additional supportive team that we're going to talk about later. And we're also talking about with violence. Violence could be personal violence at yourselves, violence at staff, it could be violence at a peer, and it could be violence at property. If our police officers are needed to come help contain the situation, because again, we are a non-restraint facility. We're not going to grab a kid because they're throwing stuff. We're going to try to pick objects up to keep the environment safe so they don't have objects to grab to hurt us with. But we are not going to fight the kid for an item, and we're not going to grab the kid in any way. We're not doing a restraint. So if we need to call the police, a staff member will be calling the police while one staff member is watching the aggressive kid. Give the aggressive kid space, get the other kids out of the way, and keep the other kids away from that kid so that kid can calm down. Oftentimes, just getting the audience away from that kid can help solve the problem because some of the kids are actually sometimes revving that kid up by arguing with the kid, making fun of the kid, teasing the kid, taunting the kid, or encouraging the kid to behave badly. If the youth was not physically aggressive to others and just throwing things, we need to maintain observation of them and wait for the person to move into the next level, which is the quiet period where they calm down. Again, after they've settled down from the quiet period and we've talked over the situation with them and give them praise for calming down and regaining their composure, then we ask them to help us clean the space together. Okay, because they made the mess, but we're going to help them pick it up. Now, while you're picking up the room, don't sit and lecture them about how they destroyed the room. If something is completely broken and damaged, like a holes in the wall or something like that, we're going to deal with it later on. It's not the time period to just bring that up and rehash everything that's destroyed. We're going to talk with them about it later. The best thing to do is to just acknowledge that we've gotten peace and calm back into place, and that we are working to not have that happen in the future. That's our biggest goal. But again, if the police need to be called, a staff member would call an administrative team member who's on call, and they would say it is time to call the police. Sometimes that admin staff would call the police for you. Sometimes you would call the police. But we would make that judgment call. Staff themselves can't just call the police on their own. They have to call an administrative team member first. Also, when we are at this level, you should have an incident report on a kiddo, especially if they're damaging property or fighting with another kiddo. And you need to talk about that quiet time period where you discussed how we could do things differently next time, and how the child could identify what set them off at that level and how to prevent that from happening in the future. The quiet period from kids. Now that looks different for everybody. I put a timeout chair there because sometimes a quiet period could look like a timeout. Timeout, I want us to understand that timeout shouldn't be a punishment. Timeout is a chance for the youth to calm down. If a child is in timeout, it's 1 minute per age of life. Now, sometimes a kid may be asked to go to timeout to calm down, and they're going to scream and holler and not calm down, and they're going to keep getting up, and they're going to keep running around and all that kind of stuff. Just fighting with them to stay in timeout is useless because they're not going to stay in timeout, and you arguing with them about it is a waste of your time and their time. And so sometimes if they're just quiet and away from the group and they get up from the timeout area and go sit by the window or go sit somewhere else, that is fine as long as they're not bothering anybody else. But when they're done from that quiet period and they're able to not be angry and just yelling, screaming, and ready to pick a fight with you, then you want to talk them through what went on and try to figure out how to avoid that conflict again in the future. So after every outburst, the person will reach a quiet period in which their emotional status is below their average state, and they just need to be quiet. They just need to settle because they're tired of yelling. Usually it's represented by being quiet. They have a lack of energy, sometimes crying, sometimes moving to a protected area. Sometimes they want to go to their room, and that's fine. As long as they don't have a suicidal history and they want to go to their room and just rest a minute and get away from y'all, that's fine. As long as there's not another person there, because you want to make sure that another person is not there and they're not up to mischief. So if they're going to go to quiet time, you may have to give the rest of your group leaders your children in your group to another group leader so you can go sit in the hallway down where a child is sitting in their bedroom. But when you do that, you allow them to have quiet time. You can still see them. You're ready for them to talk to you when they're ready, but you're not going to sit and talk to them until they're ready. So don't sit and just lecture them or ask them questions from that chair. Be quiet and have them come to you. So you would say, Billy, I know you want to go to your room. Let's go ahead and go down here. Miss Sarah's going to watch the rest of my group so I can be outside the door for you when you're ready to talk. I am ready to listen. And that way they know you're there to support them, you're there to comfort them, but they need to take a breather before they're ready to do that. So quietly offer your support. Now we're back in control. The outburst is over and the person has regained control. Still a sensitive time, and we need to take care should be given not to re-escalate the situation. So this is not a time to rehash all their faults. It's not a time to rehash anybody else's faults. It's not a time to rehash fairness issues. It's just a time to allow them to rejoin the communication with other people, to go back into the group. This is where we clean up any messes and damage that we've made. This is where we ask a person which choices they have selected. See, I like that sign over there on the left. It says help, support, advice, guidance, assistance. You don't need to tell them which sign they need. They need to tell you which sign they need. Don't assume anything. And so they need to tell you what set them off, and they need to tell you how you can better help them in the future by giving them support, advice, assistance, and guidance. Notice that help is at the top by itself. Support and advice and guidance and assistance are kind of on the bottom tiers there. Those are things that we can offer them. But they determine those things. And again, this back and control time is not a time to rehash everything they've ever done wrong or to, list everything that went down. It's just to say, hey, Where did you see things go wrong, and how do you think we can do that differently in the future? And then always being sure to acknowledge how much you appreciate them for regaining self-control and being able to be willing to understand the situation better and to try to do things differently in the future. Now let's review anger and awareness. Anger follows a predictable and observable pattern. There are appropriate interventions for each level of the anger cycle. You are an active participant in the cycle and can escalate or de-escalate the behavior with your actions as a staff member. When a person reaches the outburst level, they are no longer in control of their actions. This is where we lose our mind. We go crazy. We're crazy with rage. This is the key point during an outburst, is to create the safest environment possible to prevent injury. The way we do that is by minimizing objects in the room and getting our audience away from us, so we have less stimulus to bother us and we have less people to fight with. Often it is also talking in a nice voice, a calm voice, a reassuring voice, a compassionate voice, and an empathetic listening voice, and also using those reflective listening skills that we talked about earlier. Notice number 6 is in bold. Never attempt a physical intervention, as we do not restrain in our agency. So there are no restraints in our agency. We're not going to hold a kid down. We're not going to pick a kid up and yell at them. We're not going to drag a kid down the hall by their arm and yell at them. They're not going to be forced into a room, into timeout, into seclusion. They have to choose to go to their room to timeout if they want to, but we're not forcing them to go there. A toddler's not going to be forced to go into a high chair because they're being obnoxious. And so none of those things are going to happen. We don't do any form of physical restraints. We don't do any kind of chemical restraints, and we do not do any kind of mechanical restraints. So let's cover that one more time. Never attempt a physical intervention, as we do not do restraints in our agency ever. I really like this clip art. Healing is in the relationship. You must first teach a child he is loved. Only then he is ready to learn everything else. And that is so true. And not just that he is loved or she is loved, but they are part of the group, that they're socially accepted, that we value them, that they feel included in what we do. If we treat our children as outsiders on the inside of our building, then they don't feel loved. They don't feel like they belong. We need to make them feel welcome from when they got out of the car and entered the space the very first day they got here till the time they leave. Regardless of their behavior, we want them to feel as though we care about them. We want the best for them no matter what. And so we're going to have to work through the verbal abuse that we get. We're going to have to work through the lies. We're going to have to work through maybe false allegations and fighting and arguing and challenging behaviors. But we want the child to understand that we care about them and we're here for them and we want the best for them. Again, healing is in the relationship. There is a new study out that shows most drug and alcohol addictive personality disorders are a direct result of people feeling isolated and alone. They have a disconnection to the world around them, even when they're in a world with people. So it's regardless of money or socioeconomic status. If they feel genuinely alone and unloved and uncared for, that's when problems arise. What is our relationship equation? Engagements and achievements combined, like engaging a youth and helping them achieve something, equals a good relationship. That allows them to have buy-in. I really like that clip art there. No significant learning occurs without a significant relationship. We don't learn all by ourselves. Only through trial and error can we learn by ourselves, but for the most part, we learn as a group. We learn from other human beings, and so we need each other to teach each other to grow. And so these children actually need our help. Sometimes they don't want our help, but they need our help. Children in foster care are like all kids. They need love, kindness, support, and encouragement. These kids have been removed from everything they know, and they need a caring adult who can offer them a safe, secure environment, provide consistency and patience, and be understanding during their greatest time of need. They've lost everything. They've left behind everything, and they have seen so many awful things that sometimes it's too painful to share. According to Harvard's study, science shows that children who do well despite serious hardships have at least one stable, committed relationship with a supportive adult. These relationships buffer children from the development of disruption and help them to develop resilience, or the set of skills needed to respond to adversity and thrive. Those kids who are resilient, those crafters, those gamers, those sporty kids, those singers, those artists, those gardeners, those writers, those workers, those science kids, those kids who have a buy-in to grow and change and develop in life, had one adult back in their corner saying, "You can do this, man, I believe in you." That's what our kids need from us. They need us to be that one adult that says, "You can do this, I believe in you." And so sometimes we're not just cheering them on to do a great thing in school. Sometimes we're cheering them on to get potty trained. Sometimes we're cheering them on to quit being so angry and just engage in life and to want to live. Sometimes we're cheering them on to just crawl out of bed and take a shower and do the basic hygiene skills they need to survive. Sometimes we're cheering them on just to eat a healthy meal so they can learn proper nutrition so they feel well enough to learn in school. Sometimes they need us to cheer them on to make better choices in their relationships with their peers so they're not taken advantage of. Being that healthy, significant adult who is there for them to encourage them to achieve their goals and build healthier relationships, not only just with us as their staff members, but the world around them. In many cases, our GRO staff or foster parents get that opportunity to be that supportive adult, to change a child's future outcomes. So many times in my career, I have been here and I thought I never made a difference in the life of a child who was difficult, a child who struggled, a child who we battled with. And then I've been fortunate that I've had the opportunity to later on meet that child who once drove me crazy at Walmart or the grocery store or the hospital or the nursing home or at a sporting event. And I got to see them being a productive adult, and I don't even recognize them, but they know who I am, and they say, "Hey, Miss Sheila, thank you for being that one adult that I could count on." And I had no idea that I had made that impact. That's the sad thing about our job, is you may do a great thing, and you may actually prevent child abuse from happening in that child's life. You put a snuff out on that particular situation to where you stopped the abusive cycle in that kid's life and gave them the inspiration to find hope and do better in their lives. And you never knew that you did that. This is your opportunity to be that one relationship with a kiddo that makes a difference. And so we do have professional relationships with the kiddos, not personal relationships with the kiddos. So it does still stay in our professional sector on the job, not on social media, and not in our personal lives. And so we just maintain those relationships through our employment. Key steps to building relationships as a caregiver. Creating a safe place for children to express their emotions and concerns and feel secure during times of uncertainty. Being a patient and understanding of all the emotional and behavioral struggles a child in care may experience from their trauma. That trauma-informed care approach, knowing where they came from, that is one of the keys to being a relationship builder with our kiddos. Also, letting them have that safe place to express their emotions in an unhealthy and healthy way. If we don't allow them to express their emotions freely, then we're not going to be able to address those unhealthy times where they scream, holler, and cuss. And so we're going to have to allow for that window for them to throw a fit so we can teach them to get self-control over their emotions. Committing to developing a relationship with the child and a sense of belonging in our home or shelter, our children's home, our teen shelter, letting them feel that they belong. We just talked about that on the previous slide. If you don't feel as though you belong to the group and you feel like an outsider, you'll never be an insider, you'll never belong, and you're always going to struggle. Don't make our kids feel weird, different, or odd. Life is hard enough as it is. We need everyone to feel as though they are appreciated, valued, and a positive member of our society. Building a healthy and supportive relationship with the biological parents or primary caretaker that encourages the child to maintain cultural and family connections while they receive help needed to reunify. We are going to be part of these kids' families' lives. In the future, in 2025, 2026, and 2027, the foster care redesign process is going to change, so we're going to have more interactions with the family. And so when the parents call, we need to be positive to the parents, and we need to tell the parents when they get on the phone, hi, so glad you called, Billy's here to talk to you, Billy had a great day, just engaging them, not just passing them off to somebody else like they don't exist. And letting the kids know that it wasn't nice that mom and dad called today. Letting them know that you care that their parent called. That for the most part, the goal for the system and the children in the system is family reunification. So we need to identify that we encourage the child to maintain those relationships, especially with siblings, mom and dad if required, and also grandparents and things along those lines. And sometimes they have significant others in their lives besides parents, and that would be like church members, friends, family members, and things like that. Adapting to the unique needs of every child and their cultural background. Some kids have a certain faith. Some kids have a certain belief mechanism. At one point, we had a situation where it was Christmas time, and then we had kids who didn't celebrate Christmas, but they had happy holidays. And so that was a year that we had Christmas and happy holidays combined. Sometimes we might have a child who's celebrating Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or any different holiday that we haven't normally been accustomed to celebrating. We need to respect that child's cultural background and look into that to kind of help them celebrate as they normally would have. We want them to embrace their culture. When I first started in the industry, I saw foster kids who were sent out into a rural Texas town, and that foster family made all the kids wear Western boots and Western pants. Well, we had city kids who weren't into that. They didn't want to wear cowboy boots. They wanted to wear tennis shoes and, urban clothes. And so they didn't do well in that foster home because that foster home wanted them to look like, a country music singer, and they're never going to be that. And so that was not a good fit. We need to allow children to have their culture. Establishing daily routines and boundaries to give children a sense of stability in their lives. This is a big one, a huge one. We have to be consistent as a staff with all of our routines: bath time, activity time, life skills, recreation time, dinner time, snack time, cleanup time, all the times of the day. We need to be consistent as a group and try to be cohesive on how we do things. The more consistent you are as a team on every single shift, the better the children will behave because they know what to expect. Having to not worry about the expectations of others and having those set routines and those set patterns makes your job easier, and it makes the children's lives better. It is a win for staff, and it is a bigger win for the children. Advocating for the child's best interest and collaborating with teachers, social workers, and other support team members. And we're going to show a slide later on about who all is involved in that. Sometimes you're involved in that, but sometimes it's going to be our case managers who are more involved in that. But oftentimes you're going to see some of these people or talk to them on the phone. So we want to be sure and include them in the child's care plan. And also asking them for support. Sometimes we need their support in getting a child to alter their behavior. Navigating challenges and setbacks while continuing to care for the child. No one is perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. The child is not perfect. None of us are going to be immune from mistakes or making a bad decision. And so, nor should we hold that above their heads and constantly remind them of the sins that they've committed or the crimes they've committed. We need to try to allow them to grow and change and be positive people. And so, by doing that, we need to allow for setbacks, and we need to have patience, kindness, and empathy to help us reset when we've had a setback. Committing to personal development and ongoing learning about trauma-informed care and effective parenting strategies. As staff, we need to do our trauma-informed care training. We need to do our behavior intervention training. We need to do all the training that's required of the state. Sometimes we're on a computer, sometimes we're doing live meetings, sometimes we're on a webinar, sometimes we go to a conference. It is important for us to grow and change as staff members and to learn new skills, because there is no parenting handbook, in all honesty. And there is especially not a parenting handbook when you're parenting other people's children who have suffered trauma. So we all do training all the time, and we need it done in a timely fashion because that's required by law. And so please get your training in. And your training is a situation that you can actually not be allowed to be on the schedule if your training is not caught up to date. So please get your training in, because it only helps you help the children. Most importantly, providing unconditional love and acceptance to help children develop a positive sense of self-worth. You're not going to get along with every child in the building. Not every child in the building is going to be your cup of tea. They're just not going to be in your groove. You might have a love for sports, and that kid has a love for Harry Potter. You know, you're not going to just totally connect beautifully with every single child in the building, but they should know that you care about them the same as the other children. They should know that you accept them the same as the other children, and they should know that you have their best interest at heart, just like the other children. You need to put your best foot forward to make sure that the children feel as though they are valued, loved, and that they belong. While each child and situation are unique, most foster parents or staff here agree that it's incredibly rewarding and life-changing during a kid's foster care journey. The parents or staff will grow personally as well by learning healthier coping mechanisms while helping a child in need in our home. And so I myself has grown as a person working with our kiddos. We think we've seen it all, done it all, and then we see a new case of something new that happened with a child, and we become horrified at what they experienced. And then we think, how do we change that nightmare? How do we make their lives better? So when they leave our building, they are not only surviving, but they are thriving. And they are no longer victims of abuse, but survivors of abuse and survivors of life with a productive future. That's our challenge. Let's talk about building relationships. Start off with a welcoming approach. Building a relationship with the youth in our shelters is crucial. It is the most important thing we can do. Again, healing is in the relationships. We don't heal without connections to others. Getting to know a stranger can be scary and intimidating, even for adults. I've even seen staff who are more introverted come on a shift with staff who are more extroverted and have been here longer, and staff can even feel awkward. It's okay to identify that. It's okay to own that. And it's okay to let kids know that it is scary meeting new people. But this is especially true for our foster care youth, our kids entering our shelter, our runaway homeless kids. Most youth do not choose to be placed in our shelters or in foster care, and they do not know what to expect. They're afraid. I mean, if you close your eyes and do a visual with me, if you hadn't been in our building and you thought of the word homeless shelter, when people close their eyes and they describe that to me, they normally picture a gray building with, white outfits and gray walls and, bedspreads and kind of a hospital setting. That's not what we look like. That's why we have the toys. That's why we have the color. That's why we have things that are fun for the kiddos. We want them to know that the shelter environment is not necessarily a scary environment for them here. Being patient and earning the youth's trust is a great first step in the journey. Let's repeat that. That's so important. Being patient and earning the youth's trust is a great first step in the journey. Actually, you can't go anywhere without those things. That is the most important first step. Understand that just because they do not open up right away, or they want to spend some time alone in their room, or they sit in the living room covered in a hoodie, that they're not being rude or defiant. They're just afraid. They're just scared. They're just sad. They're just confused. They're just lonely. They're just grieving. Those are the things that they're experiencing. More than likely, they are trying to adapt and adjust to their newest surroundings. Try to getting to know your youth by finding out things that you have in common and listening to them and understand what they're interested in. By doing so, you're showing them that you care and you want them to succeed. Sometimes it's as simple as asking them, what do you like for dinner? What is your favorite food? What is your favorite color? What is your favorite TV show? Did you have a dog or a cat? Things like that. You don't want to ask them a lot of personal information, but getting some of those things that you can actually work with and deal with here in the shelter is important. What was your favorite class in school? Those kind of things. Remember, most importantly, to keep a positive attitude and to communicate clearly and frequently about expectations of what's going on with the shelter. Even though they read the behavioral rules, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, to be honest. Even if you read the behavioral rules to them and it's been a while, they're not always going to know what their expectations are. So stating them is very important. And that's why when we go on outings with the kiddos, I let the kiddos know ahead of time when we're going on a crucial outing how we're going to behave before we ever get going. That's why we need to put kids in the van where we know they're not going to misbehave. So kids who touch each other should not be near each other. Kids who fight should not be near each other. We should use different vans for those kind of kids that don't get along. And kids who run off when we're going on an outing or things like that, those are the kiddos who need to stand by a staff member, especially toddlers. All these things we have to troubleshoot ahead of time. Always clearly and positively communicating our expectations to the kiddos is key. Not just screaming, hollering, and dictating orders in a negative way, because that doesn't make things fun. Now, let's create a culture of care. Let's establish how the Children's Aid Society staff, the Children's Home, and the teen shelter create a trauma-sensitive environment for our kiddos. How do we help our kids? When the youth enter the therapeutic foster care environment, you must remember they're invisible suitcases. Now look at that luggage over there to the right. Some are big, some are soft, some are hard, different sizes, different shapes. These invisible suitcases are what some have referred to as emotional baggage. Invisible suitcases are not unique to foster care or homeless youth. Everyone has one, even our staff, even myself. We all have an invisible suitcase. Everyone carries and holds all their fears, beliefs, experiences, traumas, knowledge, traditions. Everything we've been through in our life goes in one of these suitcases. Sometimes we pack a big one like we're going on a big trip. Sometimes they're small. And we don't always carry them around all at the same time. These invisible suitcases go with us everywhere we go. And that means our youth are taking them everywhere they go. This means it can go with them to school. It can go with them to our shelters. The feelings inside these suitcases may be about themselves, or it may be about you as their caretaker. These feelings and experiences have made it hard for them to trust others. However, with the help of you and the treatment team that we offer, we can help the youth overcome the negative aspects of their invisible suitcases and start filling up their suitcases with positive experiences instead. It's like unpacking. We take out things that are unnecessary that we don't need anymore and we throw them away, and then we put good things in our suitcases instead, which then we don't carry around emotional baggage. We then carry around a skill set of things that we can use for survival. So help me as a staff create a culture of care and pack our children's invisible suitcases, not their emotional baggage, with good, healthy coping skills. Steps to creating a trauma-sensitive shelter. How can you help create a trauma-sensitive shelter? Normalize talking about feelings. Many of these youth have learned to hide or bottle up their feelings. By normalize talking about feelings, you can help them learn healthier ways to cope. This can be done by being willing to demonstrate talking about your own feelings in a calm manner, of when you felt happy, sad, angry, or mad in a situation that is very similar to theirs and how you worked through that. Rethink your space. What seems normal and harmless to you can trigger and remind a youth of the trauma they've experienced in the past. Walk the youth through the shelter or the children's home, teen shelter, when they arrive and help them identify such items. After they have been identified, you can either rearrange or help the youth find ways to avoid it. I chose this picture. This is actually the children's home. We had a situation where too many kids were bothering each other, and so we decided to do a drive-in movie night. Some kids wanted to participate, some kids didn't want to participate. So some kids sat on the couch, but some kids sat in their car that they made out of a box that they got to decorate. And so this allowed us to watch a movie, and we used it for several movie nights, not just one movie night, but we allowed them to sit in one space where they wouldn't bother their neighbor, and they got to feel like they were having a drive-in movie night here in the shelter. And so movies bothered a kiddo, and so this was a way to make the movies less scary and more fun, and it also kept us spaced out appropriately. Sometimes it could be the hallways. Sometimes it's nighttime, sometimes it's bath time. One thing to identify with the kiddos when they come into the shelter is that the hallway lights stay on even during bedtime, and that we have staff that sleep outside the bedroom doors, because if a child comes in here and they're by themselves and they have to room with strangers, they may be nervous about how the strangers are going to behave. So we need to reassure them that they're safe at night, especially during bedtime hours, because there's a staff member on the 3 to 11 and 11-7 shift who are monitoring the hallways while they're sleeping. Also, that the building is locked to keep dangerous people away from us. And that's something good for the children to know. And that we have door alarms and door windows to keep us safe. These are things that might reassure a child that they can be safe here in our building. Also, give them appropriate control. Many of the youth in foster care or homelessness have not had control over their physical or personal space. So by allowing them to select appropriate decorations for their room, they can feel valued and respected by giving them some physical control over their environment. Also, make sure to give them personal control over when they feel overwhelmed and just need some time to themselves, if their service plan allows it. And what we mean by if their service plan allows it means that they're not harmful to themselves or others, and there's nobody else back in that space. If there's somebody else back in that space, of course, a staff member would have to go sit on that hallway where they're at and monitor the youth, but allow the youth time not to speak to you. Don't just be back there chatting it up with them, because they may not want to chat it up. They may want downtime where they just think and reflect and journal or sleep or do whatever. When they do decorate the room, we want them to decorate it with things that couldn't hurt themselves or others, and also it wouldn't damage the room itself. So we can like tape things to the cupboards or the billboards, or not billboards, but the headboards and things like that, but we don't necessarily want to tape things on the walls. When we don't put thumbtacks in the walls, just so we all know that. Team-initiated problem solving, or TIPS. Understand the importance of a collaborative team. That means each team member or staff member, regardless of position, whether you're direct care, cook, housekeeper, administrative team, case management, whatever your role may be, we work together to enhance the experience of the youth in our facility. Characteristics of an effective team. Each one of us are good at something that the other person may or may not possess. Some of us are great crafters, some of us are great at sports, some of us are great at crisis intervention, some of us are great communicators, some of us are, good at playing games. So what can we bring to the table to enrich the lives of kiddos? Identify critical roles and responsibilities. Sometimes we need to take the lead in a project. Sometimes we need to take the supportive role in a project and help a leader. Again, that goes back to what are our characteristics of our team? What are we good at? If we're going to play sports outside, I know that I'm not going to be the one to take the lead. I've never been really good at sports, but I could be supportive by either keeping score or handing out equipment or somehow participating in the activity that I'm capable of participating in. And also definitely cheering on the team. If it were to be a crafting project, I might be able to take the lead. I might be able to think of the idea of what we're going to do, put in the work order to the administrative team to buy my supplies, and to actually teach the class to the kids. but my coworkers, if they were working direct care with my shift, could actually be helpful for me by either participating and painting in the project with the children and in a positive way so they could see an active participant, or if they don't paint, handing out supplies to the other children and the staff and keeping things running smoothly. Also, we need to figure out how to identify how to be a supportive team member when we're struggling. We're in it together. If I see somebody struggling, I don't want to assume that they need me to take over, but if I can see that they're struggling and they're stressed out, then I know I need to take over. So I could go in and say, hey, Miss Sarah, would you like to take a break? I can take over from here and let you have a break. And so that's my hint to her, not that I think that she's not capable of doing it, but that I think she needs to tap out a minute because I could tell she's losing it. She's raising her voice too much and she seems agitated. She seems angry. And so I'm trying to let her tap out so she can take the hints, not in an offensive way. I'm not being rude. I'm trying to help her out to where I could take over. And then she could change and watch a different group just to give her a break. Sometimes we can ask for help and say, hey, I'm struggling here with Billy, and so can you help me with Billy because I need to go to the restroom. And that's just a hint that I need to pass Billy off so I can go to the restroom, regroup, and come back. Now, don't do that all the time. If you're doing that all the time, then it shows you can't handle your group. This is something that we do selectively and when we know we really need assistance. Consistency in our rules and schedules and also following all of our policies and behavioral guidelines really do matter. Again, following a routine with kids with ADHD, neurodivergent issues like autism or IDD, kiddos with OCD, ODD, PTSD, any kind of trauma-based issues, these kiddos work better and well under a routine. So it is important that we follow these to detail and that we keep them fair and valid for all kids at all stages of life. We need to work smarter, not harder. We need to troubleshoot our schedule before we even hit the floor. We need to know what kind of kids we have in house. We need to know what kind of staff we have in house. Looking at the schedule ahead of time and knowing who you're working with and what they're good at, and then planning together as a team. Hey, Sarah, you and I both work Thursday next week. Let's do this with the kids. And then planning that with the administrative staff to make sure we have whatever it is you were wanting to plan for that activity. Now, sometimes we can do it. Sometimes we can't, especially when it comes down to outings. Sometimes we can go, sometimes we can't. It just depends on how many staff we have. It also depends on funding, and it also depends on how the children are behaving in house. Sometimes staff will ask us to go on an outing, but they can't control the kids in the building. If you can't control the kids in the building, then you can't control the kids on an outing. So sometimes you may get told no, that you can't take the kids out on an outing, and it's strictly because you can't even control them on the property. We shouldn't go out in public if we can't control them in our own workspace. So let's work smarter, not harder. Building a strong team. Develop a shift plan before your shift and share the activity ideas on how you can support each other as a team. Don't be afraid to ask for advice or help from a seasoned staff member or a staff member who tends to do better with another youth. Sometimes a kid just bonds better with someone else rather than you. It could be cultural and it could be an age thing. It also could be just that they work better with that kid than you. Asking for advice is not a sign of weakness. It doesn't mean that you're relinquishing your ability to watch that group, but you're just asking for better ways to work with that kid. Monitor behavior concerns and share them by documenting them. We need to make sure that all behavior concerns on kiddos are documented in their notes. And if there was a significant incident of aggression or fighting or things along those lines that required an incident report, those forms also have to be done, with all the proper persons contacted and the forms completed fully. Maintain communication with the staff and administration when you need to address any youth issues or needs that need immediate attention, such as medication refills, or if a child continues to struggle with a behavior at a certain time of day. We're looking at, does it happen at a certain time of day? Does it happen with certain people? Does it happen in a certain area? We're looking to see if there's a pattern of behavior with their aggression. Report all important and immediate youth concerns to the case manager so they can watch for the notes or reports. So if there was a significant incident report to look for, it's important that the case manager knows. Somebody give that case manager a heads up, so like call them and let them know so they know to watch for that the next day. And again, always talk to your coworkers and the next shift to make sure everybody is aware of what's going on with the kiddo. Occasionally, we're going to have a team meeting using our TIPS, which is the team-initiated problem-solving techniques. That's where all behaviors are documented and we've looked through them and we've identified that there is definitely a problem that we need to address. And one thing that we need to note in this particular section is that all behavior is a form of communication. It's nonverbal communication. Tracking a youth's behavior is vital into understanding why the youth may behave a certain way to different situations. When youth react in a certain way, they are communicating with you, and sometimes they do not know how to respond, so instead they act out their feelings. Finding out these behaviors will help you understand the youth better. Tracking and reinforcing positive behaviors can help youth adjust and feel confident learning to communicate in new, more positive ways. When tracking a youth's behavior in their log notes, you want to know how frequently does it occur? Is it always at bath time? Is it always at dinner time? Is it always at bedtime? Is it always after a phone call from mom? Is it always after visitation? Is it always right after school? How intense or serious is the behavior? Is it a situation to where the kid cries every single time they get off the phone with the parent and then becomes hostile? Or is after visitation they throw fits? Or if they have night terrors and they're screaming in the night, you know, how often and how serious does this occur? And of course we need to document what time of day that this behavior occurred. In the notes we want to identify the behavior, but we also want to identify anything that we discuss with the youth to work on that behavior. So as a team you can discuss what you experience and see what methods change the youth's behavior effectively. So if somebody else has been able to comfort a child to soothe that behavior down and help them go back to sleep, or get them to take a bath, or get them to take their medication, or whatever the problem may be, what has worked for somebody else, we need to communicate with one another and say, hey guys, I'm struggling to get Billy or Sarah to do this. What have you done in this particular circumstance? Talking with those direct care people who are in the direct line of service with the kiddos and find out what is working, and then doing what that is with the kid when you're working with the kid to see if it works for you as well, and then monitoring that. And again, anytime we've had to note a significant behavior problem, making sure that our case managers know to look for that immediately, not having them just find it in the notes. We need to know any kind of behavioral problems the next day, or actually the day of or the next day, so we know what we're looking for. We are all part of the bigger team taking care of our kiddos. If you notice, the youth is right there in the middle. That is who our target or our focus or the key person is in our environment. Then it starts with teams that work. So then if you look at the starting point there on the left, then it's going to be us. It starts with us. We are directly working with the kiddos. And then we have direct contact with to engage. Sometimes we have contact with special ed teachers and regular teachers. Most often the case managers do, but sometimes staff does as well. The CASA workers come and go, and it's important to talk to them, acknowledge them, let them know how the child is doing in our environment, and also let them know when we need some assistance. Sometimes the child may still have a CPS worker, a juvenile probation officer, sometimes a police officer may still be part of the child's life. It's important that we include them if they're still a key component in the child's life. Sometimes it's parents or other family or kinship. Sometimes they might have phone calls or visitation, and sometimes they may be part of our actual therapeutic process. Kids sometimes have attorneys or attorney ad litems that are part of their life. Sometimes they may have a juvenile attorney if they've committed a crime or something along those lines as well. We also have our behavior medication specialists and counselors. That's kind of that category, who are coming to either give the kid counseling or do med reviews or behavior reviews, the CANS assessments and things like that. They need to know exactly how the children are behaving so we can help the child function at a better level. This is actually called a circle of support. These are all the different key factors of people involved in a young person's life, and look how we embrace the youth in the middle. We are holding them, protecting them, and supporting them together as a unified team. So how do we apply this with our kids? How does it work? How do we apply this with our kids? How to work with the youth for positive change. Being a therapeutic staff means you have the important job of monitoring and tracking a youth's behavior while in our care. Come up with a plan and write it down and what happens in the plan. This can be intimidating, but with a simple step-by-step process, it will make it easier. We need to think in terms of, and this is where you can do an activity yourself. If you have a problem that you're working with a particular child and you just cannot figure it out, write it down. Write it down. So if you've got Sarah, for instance, and say Sarah has a problem with taking a shower and you're struggling with that, write that down. And then ask yourself what it looks like or sounds like when the youth begins to have trouble. Like, what is she doing that indicates that she's having a problem? Like refusing to take a bath, or refusing to get in the tub, or refusing to get out of the tub, refusing to wash her hair, whatever the situation may be. What are the problems that you're experiencing? Now, then take a few minutes and think of the opposite behavior that you're looking for. Like, you're looking for her to go get in the shower, get fully clean, and come out without any prompts. I mean, that's kind of an example that I'm using here. Then discuss with the youth at our treatment team meeting. Together, we will help the child improve these behaviors. If you're struggling with a kiddo right now in our shelter in a certain behavior pattern, and you're the only one struggling with that, then we need to get the other staff members to help you figure out how to do something differently on your end, because that means you're the only person experiencing that. No one else is experiencing that but you. But if we see a problem that everyone or more than one person is experiencing with a child, then we need to document that problem. We need to have a treatment team meeting with that child and have that child at the meeting, sometimes have you at the meeting, have our case managers at the meeting, sometimes administrative team meeting at the meeting, and sometimes we can have counselors or different people involved as well, parents maybe on a conference call, and we can discuss with the child how we can improve our behavior. That's a treatment team meeting for the child. By using this simple method to track a youth's behavior, it helps us understand why the problem behavior occurs, and it helps us use our circle of support to try to wrap our bubbles of protection, so to speak, around them and help them improve, to change their behavior to the positive and make progress. This is both important for the kids' success, and so the circle of support knows how to be more supportive to the kiddos. Most importantly, remember, you as a staff member, regardless of your role in our agency, are a very important part of our team. EBI, Emergency Behavior Intervention, and CAS Discipline Policy. What does that look like? Okay, this section was taken right out of policy. Our policy states that good discipline is administered in a way that provides training and helps mold and influence the behavior traits and moral character of the children who are in our care. Our discipline is most effective within positive relationships and should be used to teach respect for the rights and property of others, knowledge of the difference between right and wrong, ensuring intrinsic values, and the self-worth of all people. The most desirable and effective means of teaching appropriate behavior is through positive reinforcement or rewards of proper behavior, acknowledging them, praise, not only a tangible reward like our token system, but also praise of proper behavior. All residents should be given opportunities to demonstrate responsible behavior and appropriate decision making. Recognition and staff approval should follow appropriate decisions. Man, you're doing a great job, that kind of thing. While limits and plans for correcting behavior should follow inappropriate decisions. So that means we have that token system. Now, they're not going to lose a token that they've already earned. So if you get one token per shift for good behavior, that doesn't mean you have flaw-free behavior. You can still mess up. If you haven't completely struck out, then you are still in the running for a token. Remember on our strike system, and I don't have a slide of our strike system, but with the strike system, it's almost like you're trying to correct one specific behavior. Remember when I said earlier in the training that there was 4 different behaviors we wanted to change. So let's say you've got cussing, name calling, throwing things, and then refusing to go inside in an appropriate time frame. Okay, we're just going to say those things. Okay, those are 4 different things. If I've gotten on to you today for 4 different things, that doesn't mean you've lost your token completely today. Okay, I'm having to teach you. This is a learning experience. But if I've asked you to quit name calling more than one time, that is then more than just a one-time lesson. Okay, so let's say you're calling somebody fat. So you called somebody fat, and then I've asked you to stop. You called somebody fat again, and I've asked you to stop. And then you've called somebody fat again, I've asked you to stop. That's 3 times that I've asked you to stop saying the word fat or name calling. So once you have been given 3 times to not do something, then that's where you could get struck out. That's where you could lose a token. But each time you have been calling somebody fat, both times or all the times, I should have told you, please don't call people fat. That's offensive to them and they don't like it. It hurts their feelings. And so if you do continue to do that, then I would have to give you another strike, and then upon another strike you'll actually lose a token on that 3rd strike. So you need to be giving them those verbal prompts, those verbal warnings, like baseball. 3 strikes, you're out. Okay, 3 strikes, you could lose a token for the same behavior, calling somebody fat. But if I called somebody fat, then I threw something, and then I refused to do something, and then I just kind of yelled and had a tantrum, those are all different things. That is all different things. That's not the same behavior. Each time you need to talk to me about each one of those behaviors, but I'm not in trouble until I start repeating the behaviors in the same day, at the same time, back to back. That's when I'm needing to get higher levels of redirection, and we need to track stuff. We have a strike system. That's what we just talked about. It's not used to punish the kids, but to allow them to learn to change their exact behavior. Remember, exact behavior. We're looking for the same behavior repeated. Negative behaviors that are the same are redirected as a form of change. Example below. The youth throws a toy. Staff will then say, please don't throw the toy, someone can get hurt. Youth throws a toy again. Staff calls the youth by name. Sarah, remember we talked about not throwing a toy. I'm going to give you 1 strike as a warning to stop throwing toys because others can get hurt. Youth throws the toy again. That's the 3rd time she's thrown a toy. Staff calls youth by name. Sarah, remember we talked about not throwing a toy, and you have a strike for throwing it again. I'm going to give you a 2nd strike as the final warning to stop throwing toys as others can get hurt. Next time we will have to talk with your case manager and a supervisor here about the consequences for not listening to staff when you were told not to do something. Okay, and the things that her consequences will be determined at that treatment team meeting. It will not be decided at that point. At the treatment team meeting, all discipline will be firm, fair, and consistent. Discipline techniques that are arbitrary or malicious are prohibited. Okay, that means like sentence writing, exercise, standing in a corner, things like that. We can't do that with our kids at the office. So do not just list consequences to a youth to install fear. Also, layering multiple punishments does not yield change. So you're going to go to bed early. I'm going to take your token. You're not going to get this. You're not going to get to go on that outing. Just layering punishment after punishment after punishment is not allowed, and it's not helpful. It doesn't yield change in a kid's behavior. Appropriate behaviors is to be expected from our kids. Positive behavior merits age-appropriate privileges and rewards. Inappropriate behaviors may result in a removal of some of those privileges. Once again, if a child has already earned a token previously from good behavior from other shift days, they don't lose those tokens. They can only lose a token for the shift that we're currently on. But, like I said, your goal is not to take away the kid's token. Your goal is to give the token and have the kid change their behavior in a healthy way. Staff shall employ all techniques that prevent a child or de-escalate incidents that are least restrictive. Talk to kids where they are throwing the fit. They don't have to go to their room. They can calm down where they're standing. Timeout is not a punishment, but will be used for residents at the required 1 minute per age of life via minimum standards. It is not to be used as a punishment, but as time to regain self-control or a quiet time. Residents do not have to stay in timeout until they reach their time limit. Example, 5 years for 5 minutes. If a child calmed down in 2 minutes, they can get up. They don't have to stay there the whole 5 minutes. We just want them to quit screaming or quit fit throwing. And the child themselves could choose to stay longer also. We don't send them to their room for quiet time or as a timeout unless they ask to go to their room. So you don't say, you're throwing a fit here, so you have to go down here and you come with me right now, you're going to your room. We do not do punishment in their room. That's a place for sleeping. And that's a place for calming down, and it should feel like a safe place. It should not feel like a punishment place. Again, timeout is not a punishment, but it is a choice to calm down and cool down. As an agency, we have prohibited interventions and then reporting violations, on how to report violations of our policies. The following forms of discipline are prohibited. Prohibited means not allowed. You cannot do these things at the shelter, period. Restraints of any form. Do not hold, carry, or grab or drag a youth as a form of discipline. Okay? Now, toddlers may want to be held. Toddlers may need to be picked up and carried, okay? But not because it's a form of discipline. Degrading punishment, like sometimes you'll see a kid hold a sign that says I steal or something like that on the courthouse lawn or something like that. That's a degrading punishment. We don't do anything like that. Or like people who wet the bed, they don't put their pee-pee bed sheets out on display for everybody to know. Things like that. That's degrading punishment. We don't do anything like that. Corporal or physical punishment. We don't swat, we do not spank, we do not grab, we do not hold, we do not hit, we do not do anything like that to our children. There is no physical exercise, there's no push-ups or sit-ups or anything like that as a form of punishment. I know a school here in Wichita County actually got in trouble for making some kids sit in a chair position against the wall and there was no chair. It was called wall sitting. We don't do anything like that. That is not allowed. That's corporal or physical punishment. It is not allowed. Seclusion. Seclusion's being made to stay in their room alone as a form of punishment. Now, we have kids sometimes that have to stay in their room because of confinement, which is because of quarantine and germs. That is sick days. That is totally different from a behavior-controlled situation. Forced physical exercise, we talked about that just a minute ago, for the purpose of eliminating behavior rather than for instructive athletic value. We can work together as a team for exercise. We can do physical activities like that for exercise, but it's not a punishment ever. Some therapeutic foster homes got in trouble for making kids move rocks from one side of the yard to the other side of the yard. We don't do any of that. Like cleaning up and things like that, forced cleanup, things like that. That's not a punishment. It is a household task that we learn. Non-constructive work assignments, that's sentence writing. We don't do that. Group consequences for one person's behavior. If one person is acting out and we had plans to go to the movies, as long as we have the staff and everybody can function, that one person would lose the ability to go to movies and everybody else would have to get to go to the movies and leave that one person behind. We just have to have enough staff to go to the movies and enough staff to monitor the child who got left behind. Medication for punishment. We do not give medication to any children as a form of punishment. We do not use mechanical restraints. That's any form of high chairs or playpens or rooms with the door closed. We don't do any kind of mechanical restraints. Extended isolation. Youth are never isolated from the group or to a room as punishment. So that means like we have one kid who's just socially isolated away from all of the other children, and they stay like that all the time where they can't play together. That's not fair. We just have to really monitor all the kids and make sure they play nice together, make sure they're safe together, and they can be in the same space together. Cruel, harsh, unusual, or unnecessary consequences. That is never allowed. Anything that would hurt the child emotionally, physically, mentally, or spiritually is not allowed. Deprivation of the person's rights and needs, food, drinks, family visitations, things like that. You cannot deny a child food, you cannot deny them drink, you cannot deny them family visits. Now, you can deny them candy, you can deny them a cupcake, okay, because that's not necessarily a meal, that is a treat food. Consequences that may physically or emotionally damage the child. We don't do any of those things. So you don't call them names, you don't label them lazy, crazy, stupid. You don't scream at them, you don't talk bad about their parents, you don't talk bad about them. You don't just only remind them of things they've done wrong. Those are all things that are not allowed. Staff should not suggest to coworkers to violate any of the company discipline policies or behavior intervention policies. So don't tell a new coworker to do something wrong, like specifically restraining a kid. We don't restrain the kids, which means we don't grab them, drag them, pick them up, and haul them as a form of discipline, ever. If a child wants to hold your hand and walk, then I usually let them hold my finger when we walk. You know, I put out one finger. That way nobody can say that I am restraining that child because they're holding onto my finger, not my whole hand, so therefore I'm not holding them, they're holding me. That prevents that confusion. All staff members have the responsibility to report incidents that violate our company policy or threaten the good of the order and discipline of the children in our care. Violations should be reported immediately to the program director, executive director, or a member of our admin team. Any breach of our discipline policy by an employee of CAS is considered a serious situation and will result in disciplinary action that could result in termination, and that we would turn you in to Child Protective Services as a form of a abuse report. We take this seriously. Positive mindset versus punishment mindset. This is where we put everything we've learned in this training together. Having a positive mindset. People with a positive mindset tend to focus on opportunities rather than obstacles, and they are more likely to see failures as a temporary setback rather than a full roadblock. They know with consistency and adaptability they can create the positive change or outcome they need. With teaching and praise, I know this kid can have a better day. More collaborative efforts, and it teaches self-control and more independence with our kiddos. A punishment mindset is a negative mindset. Conversely, it's marked by pessimism, self-doubt, and a tendency to dwell on the problems. They only focus on what's going wrong with the kid. This kid's bad and will never change. It tells the kids no more instead of trying to give them options, which gives them independence and self-control. It is a power and control issue, and it causes a lot of conflicts. Look at the little drawing on the bottom with mindset. We all see things really the same way. There is a behavior, we have an action, there is a result. With the result, we have a performance, and then we have an attitude about it, which changes how we behave in the future. And so literally, we've got to work together as a team to get that wheel going in the right direction. What happens is when we have a behavior that's negative, our solutions and our actions stop, and then our results are bad, so our performance is down and our attitude is negative and the wheel stops. So literally, we need to keep that wheel in motion. We need to work together as a team to have a positive mindset about our kids' future, a positive mindset about working together as a team collaboratively to build a relationship with our kiddos to make an impact in their lives, using their circle of support, identifying all the different anger stages, and trying to do intervention and prevention as early as we can before we have an anger outburst. That's our goal, to track these behavior problems that we see and fix them. But we have to rely more on each other, communicate better as a team, and find out when I am not doing well with Billy at a certain time frame and I see somebody else who is, relying on that other staff member to help me through this process. Why should I create the wheel? Why should I figure it out myself when somebody else is already doing a better job with Billy than I am? I need to look at their actions and say, how come Billy's following your rules better than mine? And making sure that we're consistent, not only with behavioral rules, but schedules, timeframes, and everything else we need to be consistent with. Routine for these kids. A consistent routine really helps them understand what's going on and has them fear and worry less. Using a lot of praise, using our reward system the way it was meant to be used and not abusing our power. Our goal is not to give a no, our goal is to give a yes. Our goal is to give some praise. Our goal is not to constantly gripe a kid out, but to build a kid up. Think of it in terms of building a building. When you gripe at a kid, it tears the building down. Our goal is not to tear them down. Our goal is to build them up until they can survive on their own. And so we do that through positive reinforcement, praise, education, support systems, and documenting what we need to do in their treatment plan to help them identify problem areas they have that need to be addressed. Thank you all for participating in this training. And if you have any questions about any of this training, you can go to myself and or a supervisor, and we can go over things on more detail if you need that. And we just appreciate all that you do. Thank you.